that the proceedings go smoothly, efficiently, and harmoniously. In the name of Christ our Lord, amen.
Amen.
I think we're good. All right, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good morning, everybody. Oh. There we go. Good morning, everybody. We're here for the protest filed by the Griffin campaign. I believe there is an attorney here for the Griffin campaign. If you would introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Yeah, for the record, Hilton Hutchins from the Hutchins Law Firm here in Cumberland County.
Thank you, sir.
And good morning, Ray Bennett with Wombledon Dickinson here for the Griffin campaign, and my colleague
Will Robertson on behalf of the North Carolina Democratic Party.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Madam Chair, to get a preliminary matter, the county attorney's office is here and available to provide guidance to the board. If it's so, but you still need to let us know that you want us to do that in terms of any questions of the proceeding or the admissibility of evidence, that sort of stuff, and to prepare the order for you. I have Gina Verton from my office who is going to assist us. For the reason there's three of us. Miss Nelson is really going to handle this, but Ms. Verton is going to help us take very good notes so that we can quickly do an order if that's what the board's wishes are. Is that correct?
We are very grateful for your assistance, and yes.
And in terms of, this is a quasi-judicial hearing, so in terms of, the rules of evidence and the rules of procedure don't strictly apply, but both the statute and the state board encourage you to try to, emulate those processes. So if there are any questions in terms of the admissibility of evidence or things of that nature, then you can certainly refer those questions to my office to Ms. Nelson to give you some guidance. And you have not done, as far as I know, a resolution authorizing the chair to make those decisions, so it would be a board decision. One other matter, the document that was subpoenaed by Mr. Baker and Ms. DeVore yesterday, I'm not sure what the status that is, because it was our understanding yesterday from talking to Angie that had already been updated into the state system, but we discovered late yesterday afternoon that the changes had not. It's only about 22 instances that voters' ballots that are a question. But do we have that? Did you bring the jump drive for that today? So we do have it available, but it's got to be done through a computer. So, but we couldn't have printed all that. It's 144,000 votes, so we couldn't have printed it anyway. All right. So that's the status. Yes.
And my understanding is that it is also advisable that we start with a conflict of interest.
Well, I mean, this is a quasi-judicial hearing, and I don't think there's a whole lot of stuff in the statute, but I know they used to have it in the training that the Board of Elections did because I had taken that myself. But you have a duty to be impartial. You can only consider the evidence that's presented at this hearing. That's what you must make your decision on. You are the trier of fact, and you will apply the law to those facts to reach your conclusion. If any of you have, the impartiality is important. If any board member has participated outside the scope of this hearing with providing any assistance or that sort of stuff to any of the parties or persons with interest in this hearing that might be heard today or present evidence today, you should consider recusing yourself if you have done that. But I mean, I'm not saying that because I know that anybody has done that. I'm just saying that's just one of the things that we should cover.
Okay.
All right.
All right. And so I believe I've been admonished that I need to talk into this thing. So I believe you're up first.
Sure.
Okay.
Good morning again, folks. My name is Hilton Hutchins. While I have some experience with this board and with the Board of Elections many years ago, and I took the class the county attorney's office was talking about, I'm pretty green at these proceedings. but I don't have a lot to introduce. I'll say that first, I know that the past 2 months, especially for this board and your staff, have been busy. Maybe this is not where we want to be this morning to continue these processes, but I think there are some inconsistencies here that my client and his campaign just want to have ferreted out. I'll first say that I believe that the General Statute 163-182.10C states that this board can receive documents, data, and other evidentiary exhibits, question witnesses, hear argument from counsel, and fully consider and weigh the evidence offered by the parties to determine if substantial evidence standard is satisfied. I know that the campaign has already filed, I believe, affidavits from a Mr. Bonifay on 3 categories of votes that they believe there are inconsistencies with. And these are not inconsistencies about what's been done here in Cumberland County. It's what is reported here in Cumberland County as an accepted vote versus what the state board records show. And that is only what we're trying to determine and get clear on. As I have reviewed just in the past 24 hours, the things that have been filed with this board and for these proceedings, I have seen, as Mr. Bonifay's affidavit shows, that when compared to the state board's records, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering the language and what those records are called, but there are 11 potential votes cast by convicted felons here in Cumberland County, and we do not know whether or not the Cumberland County staff and procedures have removed those votes because they're still showing as counted, or at least as available to be counted in the state board's record. Following those affidavits, there are 21 denied and 26 removed votes in the same category that are showing as accepted in what's been produced to the state by Cumberland County, but are showing as should have been denied or removed by the state board's records. And finally, on the third affidavit, if there are 3 separate and not just 3 exhibits, there were 3 potential votes cast by voters who died between their one-stop or early votings and the date of the election. Again, shown in the state board's records that they should have been denied and are showing as accepted as the campaign has viewed them from Cumberland County. So the question we have is whether or not and to what extent this county has removed such ineligible voters from their final counts. The campaign has told me, and I think the affidavit states, there are potentially 60,000 votes in these categories statewide. We only have these few here in Cumberland County. So I think with that number in question, it certainly meets the standard that the outcome of these proceedings may be determinative as to the outcome of the election. So again, I don't really have much else to introduce. There's no witnesses we have here to introduce. I believe the affidavits may be accepted as evidence pursuant to these quasi-judicial proceedings. I'm happy to answer any questions, but really what I've been instructed to try to understand and bring back is to what extent and how and if Cumberland County has in fact removed those votes that are deemed ineligible so that it can match up with what we're seeing on the state board level.
Thank you, Mr. Hutchins. Does anybody on the board have any questions of Mr. Hutchins? Not yet.
I have something that I would like to add, and I'd like to be sworn in as a witness for that purpose.
Okay.
You can't testify, Mr. DeVore. You are a trier of fact.
Okay, then can I,
You can recuse yourself and testify.
so I believe, no, this is about board businesses. I've not spoken to Mr. Hutchins. I've had no contact with him.
You can speak as a board member. You don't have to testify
Okay.
as a board member, but you have to follow the proceeding yourself. Madam Chair, my suggestion would be that the first way to move this forward, as I understand, counsel, is to accept the affidavits as evidence.
Okay.
Do you wish to move those into evidence?
Mr. Hutchins?
Yes, please.
Just know we'd object to moving the affidavits into evidence. Obviously, the board can overrule that decision, but the affidavits that has been offered provides a list of names that have been pulled from state records, but makes very clear that the affiant doesn't have any personal knowledge beyond the state records that he's identified. He does not know whether these votes were actually counted or not. He does not know whether the people who are identified on the death list are actually dead or are the same voter as is identified in the records. He does not know whether the persons who are identified on that felony list are actually the same people that are identified as voters, nor does he know, I can go through all of these things,
But aren't these questions the questions that we are here to answer
Exactly
today?
right. My response would be that exactly why we're here. He has personal
I mean, the
knowledge of the
fact-
state board records, sorry.
Mr. Moorfield, the
I'm
fact
not, I'm not
that,
suggesting that they be accepted in the evidence because, as
But
a,
the fact
as a
that we're
fact, but-
accepting them-
But you, just, you've got to have something to look at.
the fact that we're accepting them does not mean we're accepting what's in them, right?
The affidavits speak for themselves. I'm not saying they prove any case. I'm just saying that you need to have something to look at. I suggest you don't just wander around and start bringing more stuff in here. This is what their case is.
Okay. We need a motion for that, right? Somebody needs to move to accept them?
I move to accept them.
Second.
Everyone in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And that's unanimous.
Any questions, Mr. Boyer, anything?
Yes. So I'm very concerned, I will tell you. Because it appears to me that the protest campaign in this case, Mr. Griffin's campaign, has been hobbled in their efforts to be able to find the facts that they need, both by the fact that the state database has not been updated,
Right.
and the fact that there are members of this board, all of us in fact, who have the information you're seeking, and you haven't been provided that information. And that concerns me. I have prepared an affidavit with a statement of facts that I know exist, that have occurred in this county, that have made it difficult for you to obtain that information, because what I can tell you is that there were 17 ballots in this county that were accepted, that
That's-
were not accepted.
That is not part of this protest. We're here just to deal with the lists that we have been provided by the Griffin campaign and those voters specifically, not any other matters that we may be able to discuss during a regular board meeting.
And I think to Ms. DeVore's point, I can maybe clarify what exactly it is we're looking for. And really just boils down to 3 questions that we're just seeking information on. Again, there's not an accusing the county of doing anything wrong, but just to get the state records to match up with what we're seeing here, we would like to know when the county did receive a list of ineligible voters, either felons or deceased, what have you, and where did the county get the information from? Second, what steps did the staff of the Board of Elections take to verify the individuals that were or were not indeed ineligible? And what steps did the staff and the Board of Elections take to ensure any ineligible voters were in fact removed from the tally? And again, just a fact-seeking inquiry in this protest at this time.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Hutchins.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Bennett, Mr. Robertson?
So, good morning, Madam Chairwoman and members of the board. We obviously have no problem with the Griffin campaign seeking facts from board staff in order to confirm or to ask questions in order to meet their burden of proof to establish in evidence that there are voters that were included in the vote count that should not have been. Ultimately, that is their burden to prove today, and we have no objection to them walking through their list of voters and asking those questions. But we think that that would be the appropriate place to begin, is for them to put on evidence by asking questions about those lists. I just want to level set in terms of what we're doing here today. With a protest, it's the obligation of the protester to establish by a preponderance of the evidence certain facts that can then be used in order to question the ultimate vote count in the election. But they first have to begin by establishing those facts. So They have some lists. Their affiant has said he does not know whether those votes are counted or not, and he doesn't have any personal knowledge regarding whether individuals are dead or whether they are felons, whether they match up with the individuals on that list. And so to the extent that the Griffin campaign is interested in challenging those voters and challenging their constitutional right to have their votes counted, I think the place to begin is for them to walk through those lists and to get evidence on the record that might lead to an appropriate protest. But I'll note that there are two things that would make a protest inappropriate. Either if individuals on those lists have already been excluded from the county's count. If they're protesting voters who've been excluded from the county's count, then there's no basis for the protest. Then second, to the extent that those voters were included in the count, it is ultimately on the Griffin campaign to establish by a preponderance of the evidence that that person's should not be permitted to vote and their constitutional right to vote should be overridden. So I think that's the place to begin, is with them putting on evidence with the county staff so that, and again, we have no objection to getting facts on the record. In fact, we are interested in developing a factual record here today so that the county can make clear findings that is set out by the template that the state board sent to all counties to find things like this individual voter was identified by the Griffin campaign. However, we've confirmed that that vote did not count in the final count. Therefore, that protest is moot or invalid. Or for this board to find that there's a voter that's been protested by the Griffin campaign that was counted, but the reason for the count, for example, might have been that the conviction or felony list that was provided by the state board, when they provided that, they did so with all kinds of qualifications to make sure that someone didn't inadvertently get removed. For instance, sometimes people who are listed on those lists actually committed a misdemeanor. They didn't commit a felony. Sometimes the people who are on those lists end up matched even though their names don't actually match. And somebody can end up being pulled off the list because there's someone else that's committed a felony. And that's work that we expect that the board did as part of the process of going through the canvas. We know that this board and this staff have been working very hard for weeks in order to ensure that the vote count is accurate and that it follows the rules and instructions that were provided by the state board. So we are interested in getting those facts on the record. We want to confirm that votes that weren't supposed to count didn't, and that votes that were supposed to count did, and why. But that begins with the Griffin campaign walking through those votes individually. It does not begin with an affiant who's not here to testify, who pulled some data off of state websites and said, hey, here, I think there are problems. That sort of approach really risks undermining public confidence in the integrity of our elections, because it allows someone just to identify a bunch of data and then say there's a problem here. That's not how we and then so they need to begin with the deaths, the felonies, and then those lists of registrations removed. We note that many of the issues that are identified in those protests for registrations removed should not be removed. They're just as a matter of law. As you all know, that when we have for instance, somebody who gives their name and address as part of their original registration, that there's a process for sending out mail verifications. And when the first one comes back, they send another one, and then only when the second one comes back is that voter's registration ultimately pulled. Now, we know there are plenty of times USPS ends up sending things back when someone actually lives at that address. So the presumption is that until a second card comes back saying that the Postal Service wasn't able to deliver to that particular address, that vote counts. There are many of these protests that are identified by Mr. Griffin where it appears to be very clear that that registration or that second fail on the USPS vote card came back after the person had voted, and that by statute, those votes cannot be removed because we presume that somebody who gave their address, that we're not going to just pull them off the voter rolls simply because something through the Postal Service failed. So those rules are already laid out by statute, and we can and should walk through on the record each one of the individuals that they identified. But it's important that we not have protests that are lodged just based on a bunch of data that goes in and a bunch of questions. That just like a voter challenge, it's on the party that's challenging the constitutional right to vote to show by a preponderance of the evidence that someone who's not permitted to vote actually voted. That's what we're here to do today. It starts with the Griffin campaign. They need to put that into evidence, and we will be glad to follow up with additional questions. And to the extent that we happen to identify an error here or there through this process, that's not something that we are concerned about or afraid of. This running elections as myriad details that are a part of it, and every now and then there are humans running this process. There's a mistake. Now that happens, that's why we have recounts, it's why we have the protest process, and that's why we're here today. And if we identify a handful of errors, I am sure that they will not be sufficient across the state to overturn the ultimate will of the people that was determined through our election, where Justice Riggs won this election by more than 700 votes. So if there are such an issue here or there, then the board should document it in its order, and that can ultimately go up to the state board for the state board to determine whether minor issues across the state can be compiled into something that can overturn the results of this election.
Mr. Bennett, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you aware that the legislature changed the law on same-day registration return address cards?
Yeah.
And only one must be returned, not two.
That's correct, Board Member DeVore. But there are two different types of registrations. There are same-day registrations, and it's correct that the legislature has changed the rules so that a single failure of mail delivery, when that comes back, that fails out the same-day registration. That was a compromise between those who are arguing for same-day registration and those who are arguing against it to say, okay, well, we will allow same-day registration, but we're gonna pull somebody's vote if it fails just once. That's not true with respect to the normal course of registration. So those that are not registering same day, the process and many of the challenges that are on the protest from Judge Griffin are not same-day registration. They are regular registration, thank you. And they require those two attempts before the registration can be canceled. And I can pull the statute. I've got it ready here for us today, that in that case where that second mail failure comes back after a vote is already in, that by statute, the legislature has determined that that vote counts. So many of the votes that are protested here likely count in that category. And again, it's Judge Griffin's burden to prove that that's not the case.
Yes, Mr. Bennett, I understand that, and I read the list as well. However, in our county, we did have 117 of the same-day registrations whose address verifications failed and the cards were returned. But we did not retrieve all those ballots. 9 of them are still out there and have been counted in this election.
Also not part of this protest.
So
We are only dealing with the people on this list.
Right. So again, by statute, the protest is limited to what has been identified by the protester. And so that's the scope of what we're here to do today. If there had been some other issue that needed to be addressed, then that should have been raised in a protest filed by last Tuesday. And so we are prepared to deal today with the facts as presented by Judge Griffin and the ones that he determined were appropriate for a protest.
Mr. Bennett, would it change your mind at all if you knew that if you knew that the names on those 9 ballots were withheld from this board and from the public, and therefore from anyone trying to seek them.
So, Ms. DeVore, if I can raise a caution, that I'm concerned that you're beginning to testify in this proceeding and that you're putting yourself at risk of needing to recuse. You can't both sit as the person who is determining the facts here and also be one who's testifying to those facts. So it does not sound like you have any facts specific to this particular protest, but I need to raise that caution because it will have to be a basis for an appeal if you ultimately end up testifying in the proceeding.
I think we're all anxious to hear about the ballots that are in the protest as well.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Bennett.
Madam Chair, the affidavits themselves, I mean, the last statement in each of those affidavits is that the affiant says he does not know if these were challenged and really doesn't know what the status. They base it on what was reported to the state board on November the 18th. If there is no further evidence, you can make your decision based on that, but it is incumbent upon the protester to provide the evidence. I mean, if the only evidence they want to produce is the affidavits, then you don't have to do anything further.
I was going to suggest that we hear from Mr. Robertson, and then we sort of mine through the
And
list.
also inquire,
Yeah.
also at the end of this, to make sure that there are no voters present or anything, any other affected
Yeah,
parties.
absolutely.
Madam Chair, I'd like to address a couple questions if I may, please.
Okay.
Madam Chair, members of the board, thank you for your time this morning. As my colleagues have said, we know this has been a very long, very involved presidential election with a lot of votes being cast here in this county. And so I would just like to open by saying thank you to you, thank you to the board staff for all your efforts over the past several months to handle administering what has been a very high turnout election. I don't want to spend a ton of time replowing the ground that Mr. Hutchins and Mr. Bennett have already touched on, but a few things that I would submit to the board for consideration. First, I think it would be productive for the board to consider these protests in turn. Start with the deceased voters, move on to the felon protest, and then conclude with the what I guess I'll call removed registration protest. Just that way, so we can focus in on the issues raised by each discrete protest. The second thing I would suggest is, in addition to the affidavits, that the board call as a witness the county board election staff who will have critical information to answer a lot of these outstanding questions about the protest. And we think that that's an important, necessary part of this proceeding to understand sort of what the actual facts on the ground are with respect to these protests beyond what's been submitted in Mr. Bonifay's affidavit. The final thing I'll point out, and this, I walk back what I said about replowing the ground that Mr. Bennett has already treaded, but I do think with regard to the removed registration protest in particular, there are a couple of things worth noting. First, as Mr. Bennett pointed out, with regard to regular registrations, the statute that applies for verifying those registrations is General Statute 163-82.7. That statute tells the county boards how to process registrations. First, there's a tentative determination as to qualification. If the county board tentatively determines someone is qualified, they send out a verification mailer. If that verification mailer comes back undeliverable, the county board then sends out a second mailer. And if that second mailer comes back, then the county board cancels the registration and need not notify the applicant further. There is a subsection within that statute, subsection G, that has specific rules for how to deal with if somebody has already voted while that verification process is going on. And what subsection G3 says is, if somebody has already voted and the mailers or the mail verification process is not complete, that person is to be treated as a registered voter, and then they go through the mail verification process set out in state and federal law under the National Voter Registration Act. So I realize that is very complicated. We have a copy of the statute, which if you would like to see copies, I'm happy to hand those up for the board for reference at whatever time you deem appropriate. The other important thing to note is, with regard to burdens specifically, that is not to say that this statute does not allow, in discrete circumstances, to challenge voters. If you look at subsection G2 of this statute, the county board does have the ability to challenge voters, but that challenge process has been the subject of litigation. And that litigation said mail verification is not sufficient to remove these ordinarily registered voters. Numbered memo 2018-07 was prescribed following that litigation. And what that numbered memo says is the county board may not remove voters based solely on these mailers. They have to have individualized evidence that these people don't live where they say they live. And so I believe we have that numbered memo as well, if the board needs to look at it and consider it as part of its deliberations. And again, I'm happy to hand that up at the appropriate time. So that's the mail verification undeliverable category, and it's one that I want to point out because there are several voters that are implicated by that. So just for the sake of efficiency, when we get there, that's an important thing to know. The second sort of groupings of categories, and I apologize, this removed registration protest has a lot of codes and seams. So there are a lot of different buckets of voters being implicated here. There are codes for moved within state or moved within county. As the board knows, somebody has to live in their precinct 30 days before the election in order to cast a ballot in that polling precinct. And so when a voter moves within state or moves within the county, their ballot will still, well, let me back up. When they move within state, they're supposed to vote in their old voting location. So if somebody in this election moved October 15th to Asheville, I don't know, just picking a city, but they lived here in Fayetteville, they need to vote in Fayetteville. And so that moved within state code by itself is not going to be sufficient to tell you, the members of the board, when this person moved. The removal dates presented by Mr. Bonifay would suggest that these people moved after that October 6th date. And so they would need to be counted in the vote count if they're in that moved within state category. And the same would be true for moved within county. Somebody who moved within county is supposed to vote at their new polling place. That would be, for a statewide race such as this one, that would not impact the ballot items for which they are eligible to vote. And so for the moved within county category, we also would submit, for legal reasons, those votes would need to be counted. So I'm highlighting a few of the bigger buckets. I'll note also that for the removed registration protest, there is some overlap with the deceased and felon voter protest. So that's something to be mindful of as we go through this list, is that some of the names will appear twice in these protests, which is why I think it's helpful for the board to take them in turn. So those are just sort of my opening comments. I thank you all for digging into the facts here, making sure that we get this right. And like Mr. Bennett said, I know it's been a long election. If you have any questions for me, happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll sit down so we can get this show on the road.
Does anybody have any questions? No? Thank you. Mr. Hutchins, and then we'll start mining through these lists.
Just very briefly, I don't believe that at the end of our presentations that I'm completely incongruent with last name, Mr. Bennett has said. I point the following out, though. Justice Riggs herself has said that recounts are a normal part of this election process, and as to these election protests are if good grounds exist. The standard that we're asking this board to consider is whether there is substantial evidence such that relevant evidence as a reasonable mind might accept as adequate to support the conclusion that certain irregularities occurred and that they swayed the results of the election, for you to accept this protest and consider what's been presented to this board. The facts that we have, and all that we have today, are that someone has spent the time and effort and money to pour through the state board's records, and they have found these irregularities, and they're there. It's a simple fact of the matter. There's no way to get around that. Mr. Bonifay can't be 100 counties at once. I had been told by the campaign that if we want to recess these proceedings, he can maybe make an appearance by a Zoom call or schedule it for a date when he can make an appearance. But the fact of the matter is, the evidence on the state board's records are not congruent with what has been accepted here in Cumberland County. And that is all that we're asking this board to do, is to accept the protest, consider these lists, let us know, and let everyone know what process was followed to accept if they should be accepted, or to deny if they should be denied, these voters that are showing as incongruent on these two lists. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. I would suggest that we start, I think we're going to have to swear in the director, right? Because some of our questions are going to go to her. Is that-
You'll have to swear in any witness, yes.
Okay. So Ms. Amaro, would you please stand? Right?
I think from what Mr. Hutchins just said, that their intent is that these affidavits be your only evidence. Is that correct? Do you not want to put on any, you not want to question the?
No,
staff?
if the staff is, if someone from the staff is available to
Yes,
answer those questions I presented earlier, just the process, and to how and if these things were done on these particular lists, then that's what we want to do.
So you want the staff to answer, to address each of the lists, each voter on the list? Is that?
I don't relish the idea of going through all of each individual vote, but if that's what needs to happen, again, I'm not as experienced as these folks are, but if that's the best way, fine. If it can be a general explanation, that's fine too to me. I don't know.
But, I mean, but admit, yeah, staff's available, that's up to the board, and, yeah, y'all just need to determine what you're gonna do, but.
Okay.
I can only say that I found the deceased list to be fairly self-explanatory, as well as the felon list. But the other two lists, I have questions about, and I'd like us to go through those. I think they're the ones you were addressing that are, become a little bit more problematic.
All right.
Madam Chair, the protest is for all of these voters, and so if they want to put on evidence about the decedent's list and the felon list, that you need to hear that.
I think it would be a good idea to go through all of them just to be complete. Madam Director, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give to the board shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so let's start. I think the first two lists, I agree with Linda. I think we're going to go through fairly quickly. So the first list includes 3 deceased voters, Mrs. Black, Mrs. Simpson, and Mr. Bridges. These voters, the first 2 voted absentee, the third voted at early voting, and they became deceased after they voted. We challenged these voters at our meeting on November 15th, and their ballots were retrieved, and their votes were removed from the count. Do we all agree on that?
Yes.
Madam Director?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Mr. Baker? Mrs.
I would only add that we had as evidence for those challenge hearings, the death certificates issued by the county.
Correct.
But, Madam Chair, just for the purpose of us getting this order in the format that the state wants it, it would be beneficial for us to do that, the order that you just address those questions, if you're going to do it to the
Okay.
Angie, if you put her under oath, and she can give the day, if any board member disagrees with her testimony, then you can note that for the record, but she's just following the records of what you have done, is what she's supposed to be doing.
We can do that. Madam Director,
Yes, ma'am.
as it pertains to Mrs. Black, would you please let us know when she voted, where she voted, and whether her ballot was counted or removed?
She voted by absentee. It was approved in the board meeting on October the 15th. She passed away on October the 27th. The board challenged her on 11/15, and her ballot was retrieved from the count. She has no voter history.
Thank you. Does any board member have any questions? As it pertains to Mrs. Simpson, would you please explain where she voted, how she voted, and whether her ballot was accepted or removed?
She voted by absentee. approved on the October 22nd board meeting. She passed away on October the 29th. She was challenged on 11/15, and her ballot was retrieved, and she has no voter history.
Thank you. As it pertains to Mr. Bridges, would you please explain how he voted, where he voted, and whether his ballot was accepted or removed?
He voted early voting on 10/17. He passed on 10/27. He was challenged on 11/15. His ballot was pulled from the count. Votes were deducted, but he has voter history.
Okay.
He
Madam
has
Clerk.
voter history because I did not go back in and change it to not accepted.
Okay.
That's the reason why. And it's something that can be fixed
Okay.
through the state board.
So ultimately, his ballot was not
His ballot is
counted.
not in the count.
Okay.
Madam Director, can you confirm that we received death certificates from the county for each of these deceased
Yes, we do have
voters?
death certificates attached to their challenge forms.
Thank you.
Thank you. So there are several more deceased voters on the third list. Would it be easier for us to go through these now so you have them in your order, or do you want to do it list by list?
When you say the third list, is that a list presented by the protester?
Yes. Under removed, there are a couple of deceased voters.
So we do all the decedent
Okay.
first.
Mr. Bennett,
I was just going to say that, I was just going to clarify for the county attorney that I think that the other deceased voters that are being referenced are ones that are on a separate protest list. So for the clarity of the record, it may be easiest if we just do protest by
I
protest.
misunderstood, yes.
Okay,
I
okay.
misunderstood. I thought there was another
Okay.
list of just, who referred to another decedent.
all right. Next, we will handle the list with those voters that have not completed their probation or parole. So as it pertains to Mr. Butler, who is the first name on our list, Madam Director, would you please let us know what happened in this instance?
This voter is not a felon. He appears on our felon list monthly. We've done the research. There is someone with the same name, different middle name, but same date of birth. So this voter's ballot was counted because he is not a felon.
Okay, does anybody on the board have any questions? Is everybody satisfied? Okay. As it pertains to Mr. Chandler, would you please explain?
It's the same case. He is not a felon. His vote was counted. There's someone with a similar name and date of birth that is a felon, but it is not this voter.
Okay, so these two voters, their votes are in the count?
Correct.
Okay. As it pertains to Mr. DeAndre White, would you please explain?
Mr. White voted early voting on 10/21 at the early voting site of Smith Recreation Center. He appeared on a monthly list that we receive in our office. He was removed on 10/30. The voter was challenged on 11/15, and his ballot was retrieved, and his votes were deducted from the count, and he has no voter history.
Okay. As it pertains to Mr. Christopher Boer, would you please explain to us
Sure.
what happened?
Mr. Boer was a same-day registrant who registered and voted on 10/21 at the J.D. Pone Recreation Center. He appeared on a list that was received by the state board, and when we checked, he shows that he is inactive on probation or parole. The voter was challenged on 11/15, and his ballot was retrieved, and the votes were deducted from the count, and he has no voter history.
Okay, does anyone on the board have any questions? Mrs. Shania McFall,
Okay.
would you please explain what happened here?
Sure, Ms. McFall voted on 10/21 at the
31.
early voting site, 10/31, I'm sorry, at the early voting site of Stony Point Recreation Center. She again was on a list that was submitted by the state board, and when we checked her status, she is active. The voter was challenged on 11/15, her ballot was retrieved, her votes were deducted, and she has no voter history.
Thank you. Anybody on the board have any questions? Mr. Bobby McElveen,
Okay, Mr. McElveen voted on 10/22 at the Smith Recreation Center. He again was on a list provided by the state board. When we checked, he is active. When we challenged this voter on 11/15, he appeared at the challenge hearing, stating that he was sentenced to probation after he voted. The board then again voted to remove his ballot and deduct his votes, and he has no voter history.
Okay. And we did that after some discussion because he was,
'Cause he-
even though he was convicted after he voted, the conviction was
He was a
active
felon
on election day.
Correct.
Can I
Does that-
just
Sure.
clarify for a second? When you say active, you don't mean he's an active voter, you mean he's actively on
Right,
probation?
correct.
Yeah.
He's active on probation.
Thank you.
These voters have been removed from the system as removed due to a sustained challenge.
Okay. Mr. Haywood Peel
Okay.
is next.
Mr. Peel voted a same-day registration on 11/1 at the College Lakes Recreation Center. We received the list from the state. He is active on probation. He was challenged on 11/15. His ballot was retrieved, his votes were deducted, and he has no voter history.
Madam Director, did you say retrieved or not retrieved?
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Peel is the one we could not retrieve because there was no identifying number on his ballot, so he still has a ballot in the system.
Okay.
So he has voter history.
Okay. Mr. Brandon Butler?
I was on Morgan. Did you skip Morgan?
Oop.
Morgan Esau?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay. Morgan Esau voted 10/19 at J.D. Pone Recreation Center. Again, she was on our monthly report from the state. She was removed as a voter on 10/30. She was challenged at 11:15. Her ballot was retrieved and her votes were deducted from the count. She has no voter history.
Okay.
May I ask something? I'm
Sure,
sorry.
I'm sorry.
As Mr. Baker asked the question about Mr. Peel, and you said that this voter was challenged on 11/15, his ballot was not retrieved due to lacking the identification number. Can you explain that for us, please?
Yes, whenever you vote early, when you check into a site, you check into a computer, and that computer may be 100, 101, 102, 103. That number, along with the sequence number of that voter, goes on the ballot, and it was not on the ballot, so we could not identify a ballot to this voter.
Does this happen often?
Not really. But
Okay.
it's human error. It's
Sure.
something's,
Sure it is.
it's gonna happen.
Okay. Were there other ballots in this election which lacked that number we are unable to retrieve?
Just to object to the scope of the questioning, again, the protest is supposed to stay within the four corners of the protest that's been identified by Judge Griffin. And so we should be focusing our questions on the specific voters who have been identified here.
Agree.
Well, that is true, but I think we're looking for irregularities. We certainly don't want any disqualified voters to have their votes counted.
That's not related to the protest.
Well, So the protest is a protest that's brought forward by a candidate to challenge the election based on the evidence that they are able to bring forward. It's not a,
Correct, I understand.
so the Supreme Court in Bouvie just recently said that election protests are not an opportunity for exhaustive discovery or exacting precision. We have a process that happens very quickly, and it needs to be based on the evidence that comes forward from.
As a board member, I'm concerned that this is the first time hearing about this.
And I understand that concern, and that seems like an appropriate issue for the board to follow up with staff in some other context.
In a board meeting.
As to the scope of that particular issue, for my part, what I'm hearing is that it's a human error, the I that didn't get dotted or a T that didn't get crossed, and that happens every now and then. But if the board's concerned about the scope of that issue, then it seems that might be something appropriate to follow up on.
Thank you.
For the next election.
Yes, sir.
Briefly, I'm glad you asked the question, Mr. Vort. Clarification, so that vote was not accepted?
It
For
was-
Miss Esau?
Correct.
Correct.
We went back to-
That is correct.
Okay.
She was referring to Mr. Peel.
I was referring to Mr. Peel.
I am too. So that one was or was not accepted?
It was accepted.
Gotcha.
I'm sorry, it was not accepted.
was not retrieved.
It was not
It
retrieved.
It was, the board voted unanimously to remove that ballot, but the staff was unable to do so because it was missing an identification number.
And forgive my ignorance, does that mean it's counted in the tally as?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Madam Chair, I didn't hear, was this an early voter or an election day?
This is
This-
an early voter.
Okay.
Yeah, this was an early voter.
I do have one question for the elections director, if
Sure.
that's okay. Election day ballots are not retrievable, correct?
That is correct.
So ordinarily, early voting ballots are retrievable.
Yes, sir.
May I, as a board member, just clarify the answer to that question a bit, because I think there's a little bit more to it. So we have a process in Cumberland County where election day provisional ballots have a P written on them, and our election workers are instructed to pre-fold those ballots so they can be
That is the-
retrieved if necessary.
That's the process statewide. It's the same process as it is statewide. All right, let's move on to Mr.
Butler?
Butler.
He voted on 11-1 at the early voting site of Kiwanis Recreation Center. He appeared on our list. He is active on probation or parole. He was challenged on 11-15. His ballot was retrieved and the votes were deducted from the count. He has no voter history.
Any questions from the board? No. Mr. Andre Roach.
Mr. Roach was a same-day registrant who registered and voted on 10-17 at Smith Recreation Center. He appeared on a felon list. We checked him. He is active on probation or parole. He was challenged on 11-15. His ballot was retrieved and his votes were deducted. He has no voter history.
Thank you, Madam Director. And anybody, any questions from the board? No. And finally, on this list, we have Mr. Ander Wright.
Okay, Mr. Wright was a same-day registrant who registered and voted on 10-24 at J.D. Pond Rec Center. He is listed as an absconder on the DAC website. He appeared on the list from the state board. When we checked, he is active. The voter was challenged on 11-15. His ballot was pulled. Votes were deducted. He has no voter history. And all of these voters have been turned over to the state board for investigations because they are felons.
Okay. All right, so now let's move on to the removed list, and this is the list where voters are marked moved from county or moved within state. Madam Director, as it pertains to Mr. Smith, our first name on the list?
Mr. Smith, he is not a removed voter. He is not registered anywhere else. He should not be removed in our system. His vote has been counted.
Okay.
He was removed in
Sorry, Madam
error.
Chair, I'm not sure that we have the same list, or at least not the same order. You said Mr. Smith is the first?
I think our list has been put in a different order, but he is on that list.
Yeah,
Okay.
Mr. Alan Smith.
Thank you. First name would be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I can do that. Anybody have any questions?
He's on the remove list.
Madam Chair, the problem, we're trying to make it, keep it straight for the order. Our list doesn't have a Smith on it at all. Is it right?
Start with Rhodes, check Rhodes.
I think it's the final page of the protest.
Okay.
It was from the bottom.
Rick, do y'all need a copy? Rick?
That's the other list. You're looking at the other list.
Yeah, let me have it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Yeah, we're good, yeah.
All right. The second name on my list is Burnett Melvin.
What was the result of Smith?
Mr. Smith, he should not be removed in our system. He's not registered anywhere else. He was inadvertently removed.
No counted.
So his vote is counted.
Good, thank you.
Madam Chair, just so that we don't have to keep stopping the board to ask what, which voter is what, is it possible for council to get copies so we're all looking at the same hymn book, so to speak?
I'm hoping the list that the staff has in this is
Is this the same order that
Okay.
I've given you guys?
I did not reorder my list. You have the same order? Okay, okay.
It's on the,
Yes.
fourth page. The fourth set.
All right, everyone ready? Madam Director, as it pertains to Mrs. Burnett Melvin.
Okay, Miss Melvin was removed by the state, so the state goes into our system and removes voters. She voted here, and she also voted in Buncombe County on 11/1. So this voter will have to be turned over to the state.
Okay.
So her ballot has not been pulled.
So her vote is in the count?
Yes,
Okay.
So her vote was counted in our,
right. This'll be something, because it doesn't show, we don't have a list that shows that a voter voted in 2 counties at the same time. This will be on a duplicate list next month, so we would take care of it then. But since she's voted in both our county and Buncombe County, she'll have to be referred to the state because she double voted.
so I have a question. And just from a board member perspective, I do recall in the 2020 election, we had several voters that were brought to our attention. One that I'm reminded of was someone who had voted in both Harnett County and Cumberland County, someone who had voted in both Wilson County and Cumberland County. And those were brought to the attention of the board. Those ballots were challenged and removed. This is the first we're hearing about this.
This is the first time I've seen the name also.
Okay, the next voter on the list is, I am not going to even try and
The
attempt
last
the
name
first
of
name.
Miller?
Last name Miller.
Okay. This person was removed by the state, and when we check their record, it shows that they were removed because they moved to Cumberland County. We're not really sure why they were removed that way, so their vote is still in the system, and they do have voter history.
Okay. And they voted in Cumberland County and Cumberland County only?
Correct,
Okay,
because they're not registered anywhere else in the state.
okay. Any other questions? All right. Next voter is Marangili Alika?
Okay. It's the same scenario with this voter. They were removed when we checked. It says they moved to Cumberland County. The state goes in the system, removes people. We're not really sure why she was removed. She's not registered anywhere else, so her vote has been counted.
Okay. Any questions from the board?
So I would just be curious, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, no, go ahead.
I would just be curious to know if this has happened in the past, what would be the source or the reason that the state board would remove a
I
registration?
have no idea why a state board removes it. They go in, we can't change their status on their record. It's locked to where we can't make them active or inactive. Once they're removed from the state, within the state, that's a record we can't touch.
So how are we able to count their ballot then?
Because we didn't challenge it, and their ballot is still in the count.
So we don't know the facts, the board does not know the facts of why this voter was removed.
I don't know
by
the facts
state.
of why this voter was
Let
removed.
me ask this, does the state provide any facts?
No,
to this
they
at
go
all?
into the state, I don't know what they do on their end, but they're going in, they go into all counties and they run something and they remove people within the state.
So
That's
they don't give you
theirs.
any information
No.
at all, do they?
No.
Thank you.
So how do we ultimately resolve their registration status in our county?
There's no way for us to resolve it. We can't go back and make them active voters.
But we count their ballot.
Yes.
Madam Chair.
All right, next voter is Mrs. Erica Baskerville.
Okay. Ms. Baskerville showed up on a duplicate report. We removed her after she had already voted. She is an active voter in Vance County with a registration date of 9/26. We did check with Vance County. She did not vote in Vance County. So her ballot that she voted here has been counted. Because she did not, we removed her after she already voted early voting.
Okay,
Okay.
so
And then we did our homework to make sure that she didn't already vote in Vance County also. So she
Okay,
has not voted in 2 counties.
So the timeline is she was registered in Cumberland County, she voted in Cumberland County.
And then she registered and she showed up on a duplicate list.
Okay,
as being
and she was
registered in 2
removed in Cumberland
counties.
County after she voted.
Correct.
Okay.
I have a follow-up question on that. So if she became an active voter in Vance County with a registration date of September 26th, That would have had to preceded her voting in this county, correct?
We didn't get the list until mid-October.
That may be true, but the fact is that we knew, and we do know, that she was a registered voter in Vance County for this election. Is that correct?
Now, I'm sure one of the attorneys will correct me if I'm wrong, but to my knowledge, you can be registered in 2 counties as long as you don't vote in 2 counties.
Right, and this is the scenario that I forecasted in my opening remarks where somebody may have moved to a different location. They would not necessarily have resided there for 30 days, and so they would have to vote here in Cumberland County, even if their registration prospectively might require them to vote in Vance County. So what this voter may have done is they voted here because that's what they're required to do, and they registered in Vance because they know going forward that's where they're going to have to vote because they will have resided there for more than 30 days.
I'm sorry, but,
We don't know because there's not.
And I think
I
as a,
guess the question would be to the elections director, is there any way to know whether this person resided in Vance County for 30 days
No,
preceding?
no.
I would just point out that the record shows, the information we have is it was September 26th that the person registered in Vance County, which would have been far beyond the 30 days that you're referring to.
And we also don't get that list until mid-October, and you can't remove a voter 30 days before an election.
and as a practical matter, there is some overlap, right? Because the counties, you know, when you, I don't have the right terminology, but to marry up these lists, it takes a certain amount of time. And that's how you find voters registered sometimes in 2 counties, as long as they don't vote in 2 counties.
Well, I think that we're talking about 2 different issues. It's the responsibility of this board to simply remove the ballots of ineligible voters. It's not the responsibility of this board to find any criminal liability for someone voting twice in 2 different counties. So I think as it relates to our board and our responsibility, it seems that this ballot was subject to challenge by our board, but we did not have this information, or at least it was not presented to board members. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right.
Um,
Chair, you ready for the next one?
Next one is Mr. Renmari Willis.
This
Madam
person was on a duplicate list also. That's going to be the case with most of these. They moved to Robeson County on 10/1. They did not vote in Robeson County. They voted here. Their ballot was counted.
You said that they moved to Robeson County on October
October the
1st, but what you
1st.
meant to say, or at least what it says here, is that they registered to vote in Robeson County on
Correct.
10/1, which
They
was
did not vote
which
in
was
Robeson County.
outside the 30 days before Election Day in this election.
Mm-hmm.
So they would have been ineligible to vote here.
Mrs. Talisha Davis.
She was on a duplicate list? No, she was not. Talisha Davis is something that the state went in and moved within the state. She registered in Guilford County on 10/11. She did not vote in Guilford County. That was something that the state went in and removed her. So we had no control over that one.
Their vote was removed as well?
No.
No. Mrs. Miracle Roberts.
She was removed by the state, within the state. She was active voter in Guilford County on 10/11. She did not vote in Guilford County. She voted here. Her vote was accepted.
Thank you.
So none of these that we're talking about that registered to vote in other counties before the election, none of them were removed from our count, correct?
Correct.
Mrs. Lillian Curry.
Again, she was removed by the state. She was an active voter in Guilford County. She did not vote in Guilford County. She voted here. She was accepted.
And she, just to be clear, it says here on this
She
sheet that
registered 9/26/24.
She registered in September
Correct,
in Guilford County,
correct.
and she was not removed, correct?
No, ma'am.
Mr. Emmanuel Ortega Garcia.
He was on a duplicate list. He was an active voter. He registered 9/24 in Guilford County. He did not vote in Guilford County. He voted here.
And again, he was not removed, correct? His ballot was not
No,
removed.
none of these voters were challenged.
And
None of
why-
these.
And is there a reason that those challenges, that is
Because we got our duplicate list mid-October.
Correct, but our.
So these people, by the time we got to take them off, they were already voted. We double-checked with the other county to make sure they had not already voted. If they had already voted, then we would have challenged their ballot.
So challenges had to be presented to the board by November 12th, is that correct? That was our challenge deadline.
I believe that's right.
I think that might
Sorry,
be right.
Midwest.
I don't know the date right offhand.
Well, there were two dates, two challenge dates, actually. One is 5 o'clock on Election Day.
One is
and-
this five days after the election, so 5 days after the election is the deadline for challenges.
But we knew about these in mid-October, correct? Or you knew about them? We did
No,
not.
I knew about these late October.
Okay, you knew about them in October,
All
but
right,
the
let's
board did
mention
not.
that.
Madam Chair, I think this is probably the appropriate time to hand up the authority that I mentioned in my opening
Okay.
remarks into the witness. May I approach?
Sure.
Thank you.
Copies that I will give you.
We can, yeah, thank you. Here, you can have mine and we can share. We can make a copy later on.
Madam Elections Director, I've just handed you number memo 2018-07 from the State Board of Elections. Are you familiar generally with numbered memos that the State
Yes.
Board publishes? And can you explain briefly for the record what they are?
Go to sleep and wake up with me.
There are memos and guidance from the state board that we must follow in conducting elections.
Okay, and the number memo that's in front of you was published in 2018 in response to a court order, correct?
Correct.
And at the bottom of the memo, you see a couple of paragraphs of instructions to the county board, right?
Yes, sir.
What does paragraph 1 say? Can you read that?
No voter challenges based on change of residency. Do not remove a voter from the rolls when a voter challenge is brought based on change of residency. Do not hold a hearing or take any other action to consider a voter challenge based on a voter's change of residency.
And can you also, I apologize for making you read this out loud, but can
That's
you
fine.
read paragraph 2 for the record as
Sure.
well?
No voter challenges based on other qualifications without individualized knowledge within the 90 days before an election. Do not remove a voter from the rolls within the 90 days preceding a federal election based on a voter challenge brought without an individualized inquiry as to the circumstances of each voter. Do not hold a hearing or take any other action to consider a voter challenge that is brought without individualized inquiry by the challenger.
So,
Madam Elections Director, that guidance seems to indicate that the county board needs to have individualized evidence with respect to the voters that it's intending to remove before initiating a challenge, correct?
Yes.
And separately, it also appears to forbid challenges based on change of residency, correct?
Correct.
so Mr.
And do you know why the numbered memo, it was promulgated based on a court order? Do you know what that court order is about, or have any knowledge?
Though, I want to say it was something that we were probably involved in back in 2016, yeah. In
Mr. Roberts,
NAACP and the state board.
Member Baker.
Yes.
Yeah,
Voter
Mr. Roberts.
challenges based on
I think we're
residency.
familiar with that in Cumberland County. It had to do with a list of thousands of voters who, an individual in the county had chosen to challenge based on his own research. And the courts ruled that that could not occur within 90 days of election. I'm not sure how that relates to this situation, but those were the circumstances.
Having been a defendant in that action, I can assure you, you remember it.
Yes. Okay, you ready?
Any other questions from the board?
Okay.
So, next is Mrs. Mariah May.
Destiny May?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
sorry.
All right. She's a removed voter. She moved from the county. She's active in Wayne County. She registered 4/1/2024. She did not vote in Wayne County, and I'll have to see when she actually registered here, because she should have been removed a long time ago if she was on a list.
Did she voted in Cumberland County, though?
Yes, she did.
And we did not remove her ballot, correct?
No, we did not.
All right.
I believe she's looking it up for us.
Yeah, I'm not really sure why she was never removed because she registered 8/19/2022. So I'm not sure if she just started showing up on a duplicate list. I don't know the case of this one. I apologize.
Okay.
I don't know why she was not challenged or any of that nature.
All
I'm
right.
sorry, could you say that?
I do not know why she was not challenged.
So she had, you were talking kind of softly, but she registered in this county in 2022, and then she
Correct.
became an active voter in Wayne County in
April of 2024.
April of 2024.
Mhm.
So that's a ballot that should have been challenged, is that correct?
That, yes, from the looks of it, yes.
So,
I can make
Seiler.
one
Yes.
clarification. When you say that it should have been challenged, do you mean that it should have been removed from the voter rolls more than 90 days before? the
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, so but just for clarity, in terms of whether the voter should have been challenged, that would have required individualized evidence in order to remove them within the 90-day period.
Correct, correct.
And just based on your own experience, that individualized evidence, part of that would have been her voter registration and voter history in Wayne County, is that correct?
Say that again?
Part of the so the ruling that we're working off of was when there was a large group of voters, thousands of voters presented as a challenge, the information not being individualized to the individual voters.
Right, and this could happen because there are several people that work on a duplicate list, and if it's missing, if they're not sure about something, they won't remove them. Then we have to contact the other county to see if they'll send us an application so we can verify the information is the same before we remove a voter.
Okay, so it's possible that there was some ambiguity here, and
Right.
in the interest of not removing a voter in error,
Correct.
this registration remained.
Right.
We did, and have we yet done the research on that?
She's actually now removed in our system.
And that is because we did the research on
Yes,
that?
yes, ma'am.
The next voter is Mrs. Seiler.
All right, she was removed by the state within the state. She moved to Hoke County. She did not vote in Hoke County. She voted here. Her ballot was accepted.
But it says here she was an active voter in Hope County. What's that mean?
She's active. She is an active registration in Hoke County.
And she has voted in Hope County?
She did not.
She did not in this
She did
election?
not vote
What
in-
does that, it just means
She
that's her
actually moved
status.
to Hoke County 10/25 is when she was removed from our system. 10/25 of 24.
So if she was removed from our system on October 25th of this year preceding the election day, would she have been subject to challenge?
No.
No, no.
And to clarify, that's both because it was within 30 days before,
Correct,
so she would have to vote in this county, correct?
correct.
And then it would also be because the court order and the number memo would require individualized evidence to challenge that voter based on registration status and any of that, is that correct?
Correct.
Can I ask another question of the attorneys in this room? We're talking about a statewide race, right? So no matter where in the state these voters voted, they would have voted in this race, correct?
Correct. The ballot item would extend within the entire state of North Carolina.
Thank you.
However, we cannot accept a ballot, no county can accept a ballot from someone who is not properly registered in their county to vote. It's kind of like the experience that we sometimes have where someone walks up to one of our precincts on election day and says, I only want to vote for president, I live in Georgia, but I'd like to vote here because I only want to vote for president. And we know we can't allow that. And nor within our state can we allow someone to vote who is not properly registered in the county where they present to vote.
To clarify, Madam Board Member, in that respect, those would be people who are not actually properly registered in this county. So these are individuals that are properly registered and end up being, ultimately being removed from registration records, but they are people who are properly registered here. And those are scrubbed from the voting records periodically. That can't be done in a 90-day window without individualized evidence about that person's specific residency and all the facts, not just some data that's in the board's databases.
All right, the next voter is Mr. Jason Bodner.
He was
Oh.
removed within the state. On 10/29, he is an active voter in Hope County, and he did not vote in Hope County.
And again, since this voter is within 30 days, he would have had to
Correct.
vote in Cumberland County.
Correct.
Thank you.
It's that whole, what we say, a 30-day rule.
Mr. Payam Matthews.
Okay, Mr. Matthews, he was removed from the county on a duplicate list. He was active 10/2/24 in Harnett County. He did not vote in Harnett County.
So, Madam
He
Director, that,
appeared on the duplicate list that we handled later in the month of October.
so he was an active voter in Harnett County and registered to vote there on 10/2,
He registered to vote here on 9/5.
and on 9/5, he registered to vote here.
Yeah.
Mr. Jaden Tolson.
This voter was on a duplicate list. He is active in Pitt County as of 9/20. He did not vote in Pitt County. And this, I probably shouldn't say this, but most of these are college students.
Okay.
This is what I'm seeing.
And how do you have that information?
I have it in the database right here,
How did we identify college students?
1200 Murkison Road. He was canceled
the
10/30,
university
which
address
is the
here in town.
university.
I'm sorry, say
It's the
that.
university address for Fayetteville State.
Did you say he was canceled?
What?
What did you say about 10:30?
That's when he was removed from our system, Mr.
He was
Tolson.
removed from our system on 10:30?
Correct.
Director, may I ask a follow-up question about that? So if you're a college student who either attends university here or lives here and attends university somewhere else, those individuals might be more likely to have inadvertently registered in two different counties, is that correct?
Correct.
And so in terms of where that individual's residency actually is, that might be a hard set of facts to determine if you had two registrations out there for a college student as to where they consider their residency to be, is that right?
Correct.
So if their home was here in Cumberland County, but they registered in their university town, they might still consider this to be their home residency. Is that
Correct. That is true.
And that's why we would need individualized evidence in order to determine which of those two voter registrations is actually their residence. Is that
Right.
correct?
Correct.
I think it's perhaps significant to that both of the registrations in Pitt County on September 20th and the registration here, if I understand correctly, were after a college semester would have begun, is that correct?
I don't know when a college semester begins.
Okay.
Madam Director, if you could just make sure for each one that you're saying, for the record, that they voted here and whether it was accepted or not.
Yes, they were all accepted.
All right, the next voter is Burnett Melvin.
We've already handled that. This one was duplicated on our list.
Correct. It was the second voter we
Correct.
handled, and then, okay. All right, the next voter is Mrs. Patricia Black, who was also on our deceased list, so I'm going to skip over her since we've already addressed this. The next voter is Mr. Gary Hopkins.
Okay. This voter voted by absentee. His ballot was approved at the 10/8 meeting. He passed away on 10/9. He was challenged on 11/15. His ballot was retrieved, his votes were deducted, and he has no voter history.
Any questions from the board?
Mr. Thomas Firmage.
He voted by absentee. His ballot was approved on the board meeting for 10/8. He passed away on 10/21. He was challenged on 11/15. The ballot was retrieved and votes were deducted. No voter history.
Thank you. Any questions from the board?
Can I just say that we have death certificates for all of these individuals that are deceased?
Thank you. Mrs. Evelyn Godwin.
I believe we've.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Virginia Simpson. We handled her on the deceased list, I believe.
Correct. Yes, ma'am.
So we're not going to handle her again. Mrs. Evelyn Godwin.
She voted by absentee. She was approved at the board meeting on 10/15. She passed away on 10/16. She was challenged on 11/15. Her ballot was retrieved. Votes were deducted, and she has no voter history.
Any questions from the board? Mrs. Alice Royal.
This voter voted absentee, was approved at the board meeting for 10/15. She passed away on 10/22. Challenged on 11/15. Ballot was retrieved. Votes were deducted. No voter history.
Mr. Dennis Bridges is a duplicate and appeared on our deceased list, so we're not going to handle him again. The next voter on my list is Mrs. Morgan Esau, and I
I
believe
have
she was.
Terrence Mayer.
Terrence Marr.
Let's see. Oh, right here. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about Mr. Marr.
Okay. He was an absentee voter, returned his ballot, and it was approved at the 10/10 board meeting. He passed away on 10/14. He was challenged on 11/15. His ballot was retrieved. Votes were deducted. He has no voter history.
Any questions from the board?
No.
All right, the next voter is Mrs. Morgan Esau, and I believe she appeared on our felony.
That is correct.
Conviction list, so we're not going to address her again. And the same applies to Mr. DeAndre White. He was also on our felony list, so we're not going to address him again. And this completes our third list. So now we're moving on to the final list, which is the undeliverable verification list, for lack of a better term.
The denied voters.
Yeah.
Just for clarity, what's the first name on that list?
Groves.
Chad Groves.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Madam Director, would you please tell us what's going on with Mr. Groves?
Mr. Groves was a same-day registrant. He voted and registered at East Regional Library on 10/23. He was sent a verification card, which was returned as undeliverable. He was sent a cure letter. He did not respond. His ballot was retrieved, and his voter history should have been changed to not accepted, but this voter does have voter history. I have spoken with the state about this, and this is something that can be fixed on their end.
Okay, so his ballot,
His ballot is not in the counts,
It's
but
not in
he's
the count,
showing that
okay.
he voted.
okay.
So just to clarify, that's simply a matter of data update.
Correct.
That needs to be updated to state boards,
The state-
records,
Right,
but the vote was appropriately retrieved and it did not count.
Correct.
It's counted.
correct.
All right, Mr. Charles Jackson.
Same-day registrant at College Lakes Recreation Center on 10/23. He was sent his verification card, returned as undeliverable, sent a cure letter. He did not respond. The ballot was retrieved. Again, his history was not changed to not accepted, so he has history. He does not have a ballot in the count.
Thank you. Mrs. Jessica Newberry.
Okay. She was a new registrant, and when the voter was sent a verification card, it was returned as undeliverable, and the second notice was returned as undeliverable after the voter voted, which put the voter as a denied voter. Per the instructions from the state board, we were to make this voter active and send a confirmation card because she got denied after she voted.
Okay, just to clarify, I have a voter eligibility audit chart published from the State Board of Elections, which lists voters that are denied, that are denied after they have voted, and the instruction here is to not challenge them, to change them to active status, and send a confirmation card, and there is a reference to GS 163 82.7 G3. Am I correct?
That is correct.
Madam Chair, this may be the opportune time that I referenced to hand said statute to the board.
Okay, I have my.
Oh, you have copies already?
That's okay. We'll take your copies.
Yeah. May I ask our director, please, on what date Ms. Newberry voted?
1028, I have one.
Okay. If it's in here, I did not see it.
It's on your chart. It's the second set of dates.
No, I understand. I got it.
But
Thank
it's
you.
near the end.
Gotcha.
Madam Chair, may I ask one question to the
Sure.
elections director, since we've been discussing the statute? Would you mind just, the statute that you have, 163-82.7G, subsection 3 should be at the very end of that statute. Would you mind just reading that so that, for the record, the statute provisions in there?
If a notice sent pursuant to subsection C or E of this section is returned by the Postal Service as undeliverable after a person has already voted in an election, then the county board shall treat the person as a registered voter, but shall send a confirmation mail-in pursuant to General Statute 163-82.14 D2 and remove or retain the person on the registration records in accordance with that subdivision.
And just to match what we're seeing here in the statute to the data that's at issue here, when the county board has a code of verification return undeliverable, is that referring to the verifications in subsections C and E of this statute?
Yes, sir.
May I ask a question for clarification, Angie? So if we have a registrant like this, who the first card is returned and the second card is returned, but that falls after they may have voted early or on election day, and we're instructed to return them to active status.
Correct.
So what purpose has been served by the attempts to verify their address?
They will be sent, they'll get a confirmation card.
And what happens then?
Once that comes back, whenever we scan it into the system, it changes their status.
To what?
That I don't really know yet.
Madam Director?
Yes, sir.
Technically, I believe we don't consider them, correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is that if the person has already voted, we move them to a status that says active but unverified.
Correct.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
So it's not
So they'll
active,
get a
it's active but unverified.
unverified.
And it's for that purpose we subsequently send them a confirmation mailing,
Correct.
I believe. Do I
Yes,
have that correct?
that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
And, Madam Elections Director, one other question, just, I think there was a question about why do we do the mail verification? The mail verification is referenced in this statute ending in 82.7. These are for non-portable mail, correct?
Correct.
Do you know what type of mailing referenced in subsection G3? Do you know if 163-82.14 is, those notices are portable or non-portable?
I'm trying to think of what the card looks like. Their confirmations are confirmation cards are forwardable. Verification cards are not.
All right, the next voter is Mrs. Christine Doty.
Okay, she was a new registrant, and when she voted, the verification card was sent to her, came back as undeliverable. She received her second notice, returned as undeliverable. after she had already voted. So once we scanned that card in, it put her as a denied voter. And she has been made active, unverified, and she'll get a confirmation card.
But her vote was counted, is
Yes,
that correct?
that is correct.
The next voter is Mr. Anthony Ferrier.
His case is the same. He was a new registrant. We sent him his 2 cards. They were both returned as undeliverable. The second one came back after he voted. He has been made active, unverified. His vote has been counted.
The next voter is Mrs. Alicia Lassane.
This voter was a same-day registrant at Cliffdale Recreation Center on 10/23. She was sent her voter card, which was returned as undeliverable. She was sent a cure letter. She did not cure it in the time frame that she had. Her ballot has been retrieved. Her voter history was not changed to reflect not accepted, so she has no ballot in the count, but she does show voter history, which, again, that can be resolved.
Okay. So what you're saying is the count as it pertains to this voter is correct, it's just an administrative
It's
thing
an
in the
administrative,
database. Okay.
yes. So she has no ballot, her ballot was retrieved.
Mr. Kosi Amadine.
Okay, same-day registrant at Spring Lake on 10/22. His verification card was sent, cure letter was sent, he did not cure. His ballot has been retrieved, votes have been deducted. Again, his vote status was not changed to not canceled, so he does show voter history, but he has no vote. He has no ballot in the count.
Thank you. Mr. Leo Waswani Reed.
Same-day registrant at Cliffdale on 10/22, sent the verification card, sent a cure letter, ballot was retrieved, votes were deducted, administrative error did not change it, it can be changed, so he does have voter history, but he does not have a ballot in the machine, or any of the counts.
Mr. or Mrs. Taylor Jordan.
Okay, same-day registrant at Cliffdale on 10/23, sent the verification card, came back as undeliverable, was sent a cure letter, they did not cure it. Their ballot has been retrieved, their voter history was not updated to not accepted, so they show voter history, they just do not have a ballot in the count.
Okay. Mrs. Courtney Lloyd.
This was a new registrant when and her voter cards came back after she had already voted. She is an active voter as unverified to receive a confirmation. Her ballot is still counted.
Mrs. Michaela Johnson.
Same-day registrant at Spring Lake on 10/23. Voter card was sent, came back as undeliverable. Cure letter was sent. She did not cure it. Ballot was retrieved. Voter history still shows that she voted, but she has no ballot in the count.
Mrs. Tori Pedrosa.
Same-day registrant at Kiwanis on 10/24. Voter verification card came back as undeliverable. Cure letter was sent. They did not cure. Ballot was pulled. No, she has no ballot, but she is showing voter history.
Mr. Aiden Andrews.
This was a new registrant whose cards came back after he already voted. His second card came back after he already voted, so he has been changed to active, unverified. To receive a confirmation, he still has a ballot in the machine,
Thank you.
or in the counts.
Mrs. Hannah Ferris.
A new registrant whose second notice came back after she voted. She's been changed to active, unverified. She still has a ballot in the count.
Thank you. We're almost through. Mr. D'Angelo Williams.
Same-day registrant at College Lakes on 10/24. He was sent a voter verification card, came back as undeliverable. Cure letter was sent. He did not cure it in the time frame. His ballot was retrieved. He's just showing voter history, that he does not have a ballot in the count.
Mr. Daniel Cooper.
Mr. Cooper, same-day registrant at Spring Lake on 10/26. Voter card came back as undeliverable. Was sent a cure letter. He did not respond. Ballot was retrieved. Voter history shows that he voted, but he has no ballot.
Mr. and Mrs. Halloy Killinger.
Killinger. This was a new registrant. When the second notice came back as undeliverable, they had already voted. Voter status has been changed to active unverified. They still have a ballot in the count.
Mr. and Mrs. Avery Caruso.
Same-day registrant at Cliffdale Recreation Center on 10/24. Voter card was sent, came back as undeliverable. Cure letter was sent. They did not cure it in the time frame. Ballot was retrieved. Voter history was not updated to not approved, and so they show voter history, they just do not have a ballot in the count.
As a question, when it is not cured by the deadline, that means by Thursday,
At 5.
the week after the election by 5 PM?
Correct.
The night before canvass, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Mr. Elijah Allred.
I'm on Alvin Evans.
Oh, Alvin Evans, I'm sorry. We don't want to skip over Mr. Evans.
A new registrant, second card came back as undeliverable after the voter voted. Status has been changed to active unverified. Ballot still in the count.
Now, Mr. Elijah Allred.
A new registrant, his second notice came back as undeliverable. A status has been changed to active unverified. Ballot is still in the count.
And last but not least, Mr. Marcus McNeil.
Mr. McNeil, he cured his address per the cure letter in time, so his ballot was counted. He shows voter history.
All right, I believe this completes our fourth list. So I think in order to help Mr. Moorfield and Mrs. Nelson, we're going to have to, I lost a couple of my lists. We're going to have to have motions on each of these matters after Mr. Bennett speaks.
I was just going to suggest that with respect to the protests regarding the dead voters, I think we confirmed that all of those ballots were removed on 11/15, and so the appropriate finding with respect to that protest would be no irregularity and dismissal. With respect to the felons list, I think there's that there would be no irregularity with respect to all but a single person, Mr. Haywood Lendell Peel. I think it would be appropriate in that context to document for the state board that a ballot was challenged but could not be retrieved because it was unretrievable due to an error, and to refer that matter to the state board so that it could take it up. Of course, noting that I don't know who that person voted for. And then the third category, I think we've confirmed that all the votes that should not have counted did not count, and all the votes that should have counted did count, with the exception of Ms. Melvin Burnett's, the first reference to her, there are two. I'm sorry, I've got her name backwards, Ms. Burnett Melvin. And in that respect, we just suggest that the board refer her to the state board, given that she voted in two different counties, for the state board to take up which of those two votes should count.
Do you have any thoughts as to the fourth list?
I think the fourth list is all the proper votes, all the votes that were supposed to count counted, and all the votes that weren't supposed to count did not count. The lists 3 and 4 are part of the same protest with respect to not registered. So I believe that just Ms. Burnett Melvin would be the only issue identified with respect to that list.
Mr. Hutchins, would you like?
Would you like an opportunity to speak?
No, I want to thank you for clarifying the process. That's what we wanted to know. We will take these findings and results that you guys have already made, make sure that they are matching what the state is showing as far as the final voter tally, and the folks who asked me to come here today can do what they need to do.
You look like if you have something to say.
Well, the one thing I want to say, just two comments. One, I believe it was mentioned by one of the board members that this board considered 100-some challenges as part of the canvass process. And so I want to just say the county board was very diligent on the front end, and I think that shows in this hearing today, having gone voter by voter through these protests. So I would just say thank you for the board's diligence on the front end to make sure that votes are properly sorted. I think Mr. Bennett summed up what the North Carolina Democratic Party's recommendation would be as to these protests. And then other than that, I would just note that what we're seeing with data entries, is a question, of course, for the state board in terms of making sure that the data reflects the records. Obviously, they have their own staffing challenges and issues to make sure that they're keeping up with 100 counties. But I would just say thank you for your time today as you all move through consideration of these protests.
All right. I will entertain a motion as to the first list, namely that one addressing the deceased voters.
Madam Chair, I would make a motion to, a finding that all of the deceased voters challenged on that list were removed and their ballots did not count.
Everyone in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And Linda?
Yes, aye.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. And that vote is unanimous. As it pertains to the second list, that one addressing felony convictions,
Madam Chair,
can we, before you start, can we separate the two out that are not felons? Because
Sure.
do we need separate motions, or if we're gonna dismiss
I think
them?
you can handle this the same way. I agree with the consensus of the attorneys that Mr. Peel, that does need to be referred. That was one that we could not retrieve the ballot, although it was appropriately handled, we could not retrieve the ballot. And with that exception, I think you handled everything up correct.
And we can dismiss all the rest of them as one, even though some of them are
Well, you-
duplicates and the other one are.
You did not remove them from,
No.
They were not removed, so there's no issue with those on that list except Mr. Peel.
Okay, okay.
oh, the others were
That's what
removed. The others were removed.
Yeah, the others were removed.
So I make a I move a finding by this board that two of the individuals listed on this list, Mr. John Stewart Butler and Mr. Marcus Chandler, were found through the research of our staff to not be the felons identified on the list provided by the state, but people with similar names and birth dates.
Wait, let her finish.
That'll be, I'll do it as separate motions, findings if you like.
Okay.
Just to those two.
So we are dismissing the protest as it pertains to these two because they're not felons?
We're making a finding that,
Okay, okay, got you.
Let me clarify something. Angie, it's my understanding that these two on the top of the list that were not felons were not removed, is that correct?
No.
they were not.
So what I'm saying is you have not done anything inappropriate with this, any of
Correct.
these except Mr. Peel. I mean, that's the reason I'm saying you don't have to break them out. These two were not removed. You already handled it.
Okay,
In fact, Mr. Moorfield, I would note that these were discussed at our challenge hearing, that this has not come as news to us, and they were identified at that time as
You've already taken care of all
duplicate
of
names.
all of them.
Madam Chair, I move a finding that Mr. Haywood Lendell Peel was,
we haven't voted on your previous motion yet.
I thought he just said,
Well, it's okay to do it. I was just trying to make sure we were all on the same wavelength, because I understood that you did remove these because of in your proceedings.
If I may, we would request that the specific findings be made, for instance, that
Okay.
those two individuals were found not to be felons, and so were included in the count. Finding of
There we are.
fact. And then a finding of fact that all the others, except for Mr. Peel, were found to be felons and were removed and retrieved from the count. And then deal with Mr. Peel as his own separate issue.
So, Madam Chair, did you want to take a vote on the finding on the first two?
I do.
Okay.
So everyone in favor of Linda's motion, please say aye.
Aye.
And that's unanimous.
Madam Chair, I would move a finding on Mr. Haywood Lindell Peel, that he was, that this board voted unanimously to remove his ballot and have his votes not be counted. However, due to administrative error, his ballot was not able to be retrieved, and it was counted in this election.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Everyone in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
Madam Chair, I would move a finding as to the other 8 names on the felon list presented to us for, in this protest. That would be DeAndre Donnell White, Christopher Allen Boer, Shania Kiera McFall, Bobby McElvine, Morgan Brittany Esau, Brandon Joseph Butler, Andre Quentin Roach, and Andre Leland Cedric Wright, that the voters were removed and their ballots did not count in this election.
Everyone in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Removed. Not counted. All right, our third list is the moved within state or moved from county list. All right, can we handle Mrs. Burnett first? That is that voter that is not only a duplicate on our list, but also voted twice.
Madam Chair, I would move a finding that in the case of Burnett Melvin, she did move within the state. She is an active voter in Buncombe County, registered there on November 1st, 2024. She also early voted in Buncombe County. Her ballot was not challenged in this county, and her votes were not removed.
Second.
Speak just for a moment. If I may suggest that you just excise the finding that she moved within the state. I don't think that that specific finding would be appropriate, but I think that it would be sufficient simply to say that she voted here in Cumberland County and also in Buncombe County, and that finding is a finding that could be referred to the state board to address that particular issue.
I am simply relating the findings of fact, and these are the facts that were presented and that we found to be true.
I would recommend that I don't think that there are facts in front of this board to determine whether she actually moved or not. I note that there is a reference within the state board's records that she moved within state, but that there's not sufficient facts for this board to find that she has moved or changed her residency.
I believe we have this, that our director was sworn as a witness in this case, and this is the evidence she's presented to us under oath, and therefore I included in the finding.
I would suggest that the board then vote to deny the finding, but then make a finding that Ms. Burnett voted here in Cumberland County and also in Buncombe County, and then ultimately that issue can be referred to the state board.
Do I have a second on that motion?
Yes, I already seconded.
Okay. Everyone in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Everyone opposed? You opposed? You abstain?
Abstain.
And I vote no, so the motion carries. So then let's move on to the others.
Madam Chair, I move a finding in the case of,
I'm sorry, before you get there, Are we going to take the deceased and the felons, are we gonna do separate motions on them, or are we gonna handle all of them together?
Well, I'm trying to group these.
Okay, cool.
Madam Chair, I move a finding as to Erica Dominic Baskerville, Ren Mary, Demir Willis, Talisha Dominique Davis, Miracle Elise Roberts, Lillian Claire Curry, and Emmanuel Ortega Garcia, that they had active registrations in other counties. They were not removed, and their votes were not removed in this county.
For clarification for our reporter, you began that list with Ms. Bakersfield, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And ended it with,
Ortega.
Ortega Garcia.
okay, thank you.
And you seconded. Everyone in favor, please say aye.
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 Hang on.
Aye.
I'm trying to catch up. The motion was that they have active registrations in other counties and that they voted in Cumberland County and their votes counted, correct?
Correct.
Vote is unanimous. All right.
Madam Chair, I move a finding in the case of Babatunde Ortiz Segubu
Mr.
Miller, Mr. Miller, and Marigalani Alicia Rodriguez, that their registration was removed by the state system. Their registration was not found in any other county, and the registration in Cumberland was active at the time they voted.
Second.
Everyone in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. All right.
Madam Chair, I make a motion to find that in the case of Destiny Maria May, Lavish Gadala Nicole Seiler, Jason Carey Bodner, Peja Matthews, and Jaden Jarrell Tolson, that the voters were actively registered in other counties. They voted in Cumberland County, and their votes were not removed.
Second.
Everyone in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That vote is unanimous.
I believe, Madam Chair, that the other names on this particular list have already been covered in previous motions. Oh, I'm sorry. I move a finding that Gary Wayne Hopkins, Thomas Hector Firmage, Evelyn Godwin, Alice Easterlin Royal, and Terrence Maher were deceased before Election Day. Although they voted in Cumberland County, their ballots were retrieved and their votes were deducted.
Second.
Ballots retrieved. Ballots deducted. Everyone in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That vote is unanimous. And I believe that covers list number 3, correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, let's move to list number 4.
Madam Chair, I move a finding as to Chad Groves, Charles Jackson, Jess Newberry, I'm sorry, the names are cut off on my list. It looks like Chris Daughtry,
Yes.
okay. Alicia Lassan, Kosi Amidan, Leo Vaswa Reed, Taylor Jordan, McKay Johnson, Tori Pedrosa, D'Angelo Williams, Daniel Cooper, Avery Caruso, that their votes, that their same-day registration card was returned undeliverable and not cured by the deadline. Their votes were removed and retrieved, and their votes did not count in this election.
You had Newberry and Doherty in there. And those two, their votes count.
I'm sorry, let's take those out of the motion.
Jessica, okay.
Sorry, could you state the names of those two?
Jessica Newberry and Christine Doherty.
I didn't think I included them in them.
Doherty did, yeah.
Oh, I see.
Newberry.
Okay.
Okay, do I have a second?
I lost it at the end there.
Okay.
Because there were some left out.
Yeah, the names
I-
included.
I caught great, just going down the list sequentially, it helps me to fix everything. Groves through Doherty are included.
No,
No.
no, they're a different category.
Yeah.
Would you like me to restate the motion?
Well,
At
just.
least the names.
Just
do
the
it- Just do
names.
it by the last name.
Okay.
Because that's where, that's.
Groves, Jackson, Lasan, Amadon, Reed, Jordan, Johnson, Pedrosa, Williams, Cooper, Caruso.
You have 10 people on that list.
I haven't counted them. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 10. I have 11.
Okay, did somebody second your motion?
Second.
Everyone in favor, please say aye.
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 Unanimous.
Madam Chair, I move a finding that Marcus McNeil cured the deficiency on his same-day registration by the deadline, and his vote was counted.
Second.
Everyone in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Linda?
Okay,
No, did you aye?
aye.
Okay. All right.
Madam Chair, I move a finding that Jess Newberry, Doherty, Anthony Ferrier, Courtney Lloyd, Aiden Andrews, Hannah Ferris, Killinger, Alvin Evans, and Elijah Aldred that were sent verification cards and that were returned as undeliverable, and the second notice was returned as undeliverable as well, which put the voter in denied voter status. Per instructions from the State Board of Elections, we were able to make the voter active and send a confirmation card, and their votes counted.
Did you intend to include Killinger?
I thought I did.
He's counted too.
Yeah, she's right, she's
Okay,
right.
Okay, my mistake, all right.
I second.
Gentlemen, you look like if you're, you good?
I just want to make sure Killinger got included on that list, that's great.
Okay, Mr. Hutchins, you good? Yep. Okay. All right, who seconded?
I did.
Okay. Everyone in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous.
And Madam Chair, I believe that exhausts the names on our protest list.
I believe you're right.
They did.
Yes, she did.
Yeah.
She had-
Does anybody have anything else? Mr.
Alvin
Hutchins?
Evans? Yes.
No, thank you for your time and all your effort as well. Really appreciate it.
I think it'd be appropriate for the board to vote on findings of law now, conclusions of law. What are the results that derive from those facts as they're very well laid out?
Okay, so Mr. Moorfield, help me with the wording. So we're either finding that there is no, we are dismissing the protests, or we're finding that there is a reason for the protest and we're sending it up to the state.
right?
Yes, I mean, I think that with respect to Mr. Peel, I think your motion was to refer that to the state. Is
Correct.
that correct? And then you had Ms. Burnett and Melvin.
Correct.
Those two, what notes I've got, those were the two that you did recommend referring to the state. It would be appropriate for us to do the order that way, but, and dismiss as to the other voters.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I move to refer Haywood Lindell Peel and Burnett Melvin to the State Board for further consideration on this protest, and to dismiss the protest as to the other names on our list.
Second?
Everyone in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Happy, Mr. Moorfield?
We can handle this. Y'all did a great job.
And I have to tell you, we are very, very grateful that the two of you made the time to be here,
Well,
really.
And everyone.
Truly.
Thank you.
We're gonna depend on Gina now, she's been writing all this down.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a brief comment, if I may.
Sure.
This year, as in all major election years, hundreds of members of our community step forward to work long days and through weeks of early voting to provide over 226,000 registered voters in our county an opportunity to have their votes count in the 2024 general election. As in all elections and all endeavors, there are mistakes or irregularities, as we call them in elections, because we're human beings and human beings are not perfect. It's not uncommon in election that one or two ballots of unqualified voters slip through, though in most elections there are none, because we have safeguards and processes that allow us to catch and correct. I believe there was one unresolved irregularity, one ballot, in the 2020 presidential election in Cumberland County. However, in the current 2024 general election in our county, we have seen something else. Not seen in any or all of the 14 prior elections combined that I have served on this board. Unfortunately, in the current election, we know of at least 17 disqualified ballots that were counted in Cumberland County that were unanimously ordered to be removed by our board.
I don't think that's in the scope of this meeting.
I believe our findings are complete. I asked to make
I'm
a
sorry.
statement.
You can, if there's be no more evidence or anything presented, you can close down this portion of this, and you guys can continue.
I'll make a motion that we adjourn then.
All right.
You got-
In that case, we will adjourn this meeting.
No, we have to vote on that.
All right?
Is there a second to that motion?
I will second it. Is there a vote? I vote to adjourn. Mr. Edmonds votes to adjourn.
Nay?
Nay. May I continue my statement,
No.
please?
We don't have to adjourn since the motion failed, but no. I think we should conclude this meeting by thanking the staff and thanking the 700 poll workers in this county that put in all that work. And yes, once in a blue moon, an error happens.
And that is the context of what I'm trying to state.
No,
Madam Chair.
that is something for a board meeting, for a regular board meeting to discuss. That's not for this meeting. We can sit here and.
Well, it's very sad that this information has been denied to the public and frankly, to the candidates in this
You have
election.
brought it up at every meeting since the election, so.
Madam Chair, I would say, since the board has resolved the protest, if a board member wants to make a statement, we would just respectfully suggest that, with respect to the protest proceeding, that not be included as part of the transcribed proceedings of the protest. That said, members of the board should be able to make their statements in the meeting, and I think the chair should just let Ms. DeVore be heard on her statement, but we would respectfully request it not be included as part of the protest proceedings.
I'm fine with that, by the way. Thank you.
Is that a compromise that everybody can live with so we can get out of here? Okay, go ahead.
We know that in this election, 3 voters who voted twice least 5 who were not properly registered in Cumberland County, and 9 others that were same-day registrations were disqualified. But their ballots were not retrieved. These 17 ballots with unresolved irregularities have not been named to this board or identified to this board or any of the board members after repeated requests. Sadly, this information was denied to the candidate in this election who chose to protest irregularities. He was denied the very information that was needed to make his case. Instead of protesting the 17 or 18 ballots that our director and every board member knew should not have counted, he was forced to protest blindfolded because board members, candidates, and the public were denied access to the names of the voters. I believe the candidates and the State Board of Elections that will ultimately resolve this protest are entitled to this information, and this board should direct our director to provide it immediately, and this hearing recessed and continued until such time as that has occurred. I prepared a sworn affidavit with a description of the specific irregularities of the ballots in question, including facts detailing failed attempts to identify the voters for this protest hearing. I request that it be entered in the record, and I believe this is necessary to ensure continued confidence in our public elections. Trust is built on transparency. Madam Chair, I have copies of an affidavit prepared for myself on the facts that go into greater detail, and I'd like to provide those to the board members. And anyone else who's interested.
Okay. We'll just note that, given the board's compromise to, that this wouldn't be part of the record, we don't think it's appropriate to add documents into the record for the protest, and we think it's appropriate to the board.
Sure.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Sure.
Two ends, two T's.
Madam Chair, will you entertain a motion to adjourn?
I would.
Second.
Everyone in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you, everyone.